I'm here today with Richard Green from C3 Ryde. Richard, you've seen an incredible number of churches planted out of your church at C3 Ryde. Would you share with us a little bit about the scope of this and where around the world you've seen the churches planted?
Sure, thanks, Tim. Well, first we started here in Australia, of course, and we planted in Sydney, and then we planted out to Bathurst, then into New Zealand. We've got several churches we planted throughout Australia, Sydney, in regional areas as well. And through a set of circumstances, ended up in, yes, and then we ended up doing some plants in Indonesia. We planted churches in Baghdad, Syria, Egypt, Serbia, Russia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Pakistan, Bangladesh, southern France, Italy. So numbers of different countries.
So roughly how many churches have been planted out of your church by now?
Well, when we first sort of stumbled into this, kind of serendipitously, actually, we started in Indonesia. We set up 9 church planting schools, and out of that came about 400 plants, church plants, but for all sorts of denominations. Yeah. And then I thought we lost connection relationally. I'm a relational guy, so I just didn't want to train people, send them out, and then not have much flow on connect. So in the last few years, we've really been more focused on the C3 kind of family. So we've planted 120 churches, C3, and probably about 1,200, let's call them gospel communities or faith communities.
Oh, that's amazing.
Because,
that's praise be to God for that massive work. That's fantastic. So what makes you so passionate about church planting, and how did this passion come about?
I think, like many of us, we sense I call it gravity. When I got born again in my 20s, late 20s, I was a bit of a mess, a drug addict, alcoholic, a musician, and I just wanted to serve God. So I thought, what do I do? I thought people do better together. People do better in community. Yeah. So I stumbled into, it really was a stumble. I stumbled into a couple of people, just 3 of us, being like-minded, and we gathered people to set up halfway houses for people living on the street. And we lived with them. We had 3 halfway houses, and we formed a little community. It was a church, really. Yeah. We broke bread, we prayed, we did all that. So it kind of started from there, but my whole feeling and sense was, and it developed from there. And my sense is, I need people. I need people with me. And if I'm going to be a disciple of Christ, it's not just me following Christ, it's me following those, like I have to follow Christ with others. Yeah. And sometimes we need those others to encourage us, but sometimes we need them to annoy us. But my conviction is the Lord is building the church, which is a community of believers, and community is about proximity. So I believe in the local church. I believe the local church is the place best suited to do discipleship. So that's why I'm passionate about it.
Right, that's fantastic. So Richard, have you seen any of the churches that have been planted out of your church go on to plant other churches?
Yeah, nearly all of them. So it's kind of gets into them right from the word go. So our plant in Egypt started just with a couple, just 2 people, trained them, spent time with them. They went into Cairo. Now they've planted 4 other churches. In Kostanay in Kazakhstan, they've gone on to plant another 8. They all are focused on the reproduction, because we understand that none of us is as good as all of us. Yeah. And we need to reach communities, and all communities are different. So one thumping big church is not going to do it. We need a vineyard.
Yeah, yeah, that's fantastic. In terms of exponential looks at is looking for level 5 churches, and what a level 5 church is in terms of exponentials terminology is a multiplying church, and C3 Ryde is a multiplying church, and they're as scarce as hen's teeth, especially in Australia, and so that's fantastic. That in C3 Ryde we've got a classic example of a level 5 multiplying church. Now, Richard, in an age where perhaps most church leaders seem more concerned about gathering leaders and gathering them into the church, you've got a track record of sending them out instead. How do you navigate this balance? Because surely there must be a tension there at times.
Yeah, there is a tension. I think sometimes I think that we draw upon our human experience. I was a jazz player, and a modern jazz player. And if anybody knows anything about jazz, for most people, it sounds like terrible noise, but it's a spontaneous music form in which you're listening to others around you, and it's in you to promote the other person next to you.
Yes.
So in a sense, our church, one of the values that we have as a church is valuing and developing people. And our theory or our commitment is not arrival, but where are we preparing people to head? So we're always thinking every single person, even from our kids' church, we're always thinking we are here to help you go.
Yes.
And now you might go into a secular world, you might go wherever, we want you to keep going.
Yes.
So I suppose that's in the spirit of us, but the balance is true. You have to have a very strong team. Mm-hmm. And those people have to know that they are like the table, where all the items sit on the table. And for many people who are part of a team, they won't get the accolades.
Yeah.
The people who go get the accolades. And you've got to have a strong infrastructure underneath you. And I fortunately, through, just God's grace, really, we've got a beautiful team. We've had no turnover of our team at Ryde for same team in 20 years, wow. 22 years, same team.
That's incredible. No, that's
yeah, great. So it is a tension. But Tim, I've tried really hard with my team and said, do you want to go and plant a church? Say, no way. So come on, you could do it. No. So I think the people who stay need to know they're called to stay.
Yes.
And the people who are called need to know they're called to go.
Yeah, I think you're right enough. I think that some people are called to be sent, but others are called to send. And so we've got to get that balance right somehow. No, that's great. Richard, during the 1990s, the church growth movement gained a lot of momentum. And I remember back then, I'd probably read everything that came out about the church growth movement. And there were some wonderful learnings came out of this. But at the same time, I think that at times we put aside discipleship principles and disciple-making principles and principles of biblical leadership. And we compromised at times in terms of the mandate to go and make disciples. Do you have any insights in relation to this that you'd like to share?
Well, we use it's really simple. It's not rocket science for us. I think everybody has to find something they can work with. And this is just something we work with, is that we think there are 3 spheres that have to be developed in balance. And those are belief development, character development, and skill development.
Yes.
And the 3 have to go together. And that's, if you shortcut any one of those and just all focus on skill, in some ways, the church growth movement was a skill-focused.
Yes.
Yeah. The older traditional churches, I think they were probably more character-based or more theology-based, but neglected the skills.
Yes.
And I do think, Tim, there's a swing back.
Oh,
And I think, and I'm really excited about it. And also too, as challenging and troubling as this season has been recently, one thing it's shown us is that unless a person is a really solid follower of Christ, they're going to have trouble. And we need to be building very disciplined, we need to build learners. Yes. Because a learner is a disciple. Somebody who's willing to learn from everything.
Yes.
From difficulties, good things, different learning, being open. So I do think our learning, the thing that has concerned me, particularly in the last 10 years, has been, I use the phrase, a loss of our driving narrative. And our driving narrative ought to be the Great Commission: make disciples.
Yeah.
Not just believers, not attenders, disciples. Yeah, that would be, and I think the other thing that we need, and sometimes I think the contemporary church has put the bar up so high as far as performance.
Yeah.
For the sake of being relevant,
Yes.
and being relevant is important, but it's kind of the other end of us has dropped.
Yes.
And so sometimes there's pressure on pastors. I would say that I want to encourage every church to have a go at planting a church. And don't worry, you don't have to plant a whopping great big thing. It could just be a small thing. And it doesn't matter, really. We need different things, you know, we need to have a go, because context is where people learn.
No, that's great. And it's been often said in recent times, we need to lower the bar on what it is to be church and raise the bar on what it is to be a disciple. And that's exactly what you're
totally.
Yeah. And our estimates at the moment are probably 200 or more micro churches around Australia are present. And we're often under the radar screen, and there's a lot of work to be done just in terms of bringing health to the micro church networks. And working out what the non-negotiables for a healthy micro church might look like. But that's also exciting. And I'm not just saying only micro churches, but really what you started with you and your mates living together was a micro church that grew into something quite significant, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think not every plant in the forest is the same height.
Yeah.
But every plant in the forest is important.
Yes.
And we can become very focused on one end. We can become too focused on. We could become too focused on micro. We could become too focused on the big. Yeah. We need them all. And I'm sure you have been overseas, like myself, travel a lot. What I find sometimes in contexts where people are under a lot of pressure, even persecuted areas, it's not the size of the church that have them sitting alongside each other. It's the fact that they're called to be shepherds.
Yes.
And so you can have a guy sitting next to somebody, he might have 5,000, and he might have 10. And there's still this sense, we're together.
Yeah, no, that's really good. We had Oscar Mireu speak at a conference a few years ago, and he was talking about planting rabbit churches, but some rabbit churches might grow to be rhinoceroses. That he was saying from memory that in the time that it takes a rhinoceros to give birth, with a 50% survival rate, so at the time that you're likely to have a baby rhinoceros born, you can potentially have 2 million rabbits being born. But some rabbits will stay rabbits, but some will certainly change into rhinoceroses. So it's about getting the biblical principles right, isn't it? And being shepherds and getting the biblical principles right. And then it's the Lord who makes things great.
I think so. And I always get great heart in reading the New Testament, because I realize that the church in Colossae, some suggest that it was no larger than about 70 people.
Yeah.
The church in Ephesus was extremely large, but broken up into smaller things. So they're all different sizes, and they're all important to God.
Yeah, they are. Now, Richard, I really appreciate the wisdom that you've imparted today, and I love your spirit as well. But just as we're about to finish off, if you had one piece of advice to those leaders wanting to plant from their church, what would it be?
It would be, my one thing is two things.
Okay.
Create a context for people to have a go.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that, and the best place to begin that, because you need to create a culture for reproduction, and that's got to start with your small groups.
Yes.
The second thing I would say is always find somebody who's already doing it to do the training. What I mean by that is that In Luke 6:40, it says, when a pupil is fully trained, they will be like their teacher.
Yeah.
So if you've got somebody who can do a small group and multiply a small group, get them to train people on principles of reproduction, of what it means to be a disciple, and then let that soak through your church and watch what will happen. You may well get a church planner out of it.
Oh, that's fantastic. Richard, thanks again for your time and your wisdom today. It's always a joy talking to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks.
Mhm.